Right, let's address this. Last week I uploaded the Singapore Grand Prix comedy review, and like all things on the internet these days, people weren't very happy about it. I'll be honest here and admit bringing up Flexi Wings and Red Bull's subsequent loss in pace was very much a deliberate attempt to piss people off. However, in my defense, if you're coming to a video titled A Comedy Review expecting an in-depth technical aerodynamics analysis, you're just a brain-dead face. Anyway, hey there guys, I'm Will, welcome to FP1 and the Comedy Review, the series that somehow still has a 6% Dutch audience. The F1 flyaways are now in full swing, and this weekend saw the sport head over to Japan for the Japanese Grand Prix. Obviously. As usual, we've got a lot to delve into, but I just want to add that we're now in the home stretch towards my end of year goal of 100,000 subscribers, so if you end up enjoying the video, dropping me a sub would really help me out. Just got to get that plug out the way before I offend anyone else. Now, roll the title card. So it's news time, and for once it was a bit of a quiet week in the Formula 1 paddock. Arguably the biggest news was with AlphaTauri, who announced that Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo would make up its driver lineup in 2024. As distant gunshots were heard from the Josh Revel residence, let's actually talk a bit about young Liam Lawson. The Kiwi drove a phenomenal race in Singapore, and whilst I totally get people arguing that he deserves that seat more than someone like Daniel, or even Yuki, it's not quite that simple. Firstly, when it comes to direct comparisons between Lawson and Tsunoda, we haven't got much to go off. In Zandvoort, Liam had minimal preparation, and then Yuki hasn't driven a racing lap in the subsequent 2 Grand Prix, be that reliability woes or an encounter with Checo the terrorist last time out in Singapore. We've also got to factor in that AlphaTauri will be completely rebranded in 2024, and a money printer like Ricciardo will go a long way for that team that was struggling in the financial department at the start of the year. I've got no doubt though that Liam will be back on the grid at some point, even if we do have to wait as long as 2025. Anyway, this isn't about him, it's about the Japanese Grand Prix, so let's press on. Also in the news was Oscar Piastri this week. Clearly McLaren, watching him wipe his predecessor off the grid for a second time, was enough to warrant a contract extension until the end of 2026. In all seriousness though, the Aussies more than deserve that spot, and a Lando-Oscar long-term pairing, I feel, could quickly match up with some of the strongest on the grid. The last thing we need to talk about is Sebastian Vettel. The 4-time world champion recruited the 2023 grid to build a collection of beehives at Turn 2 of the Suzuka circuit. The move showing off Seb's continued push for sustainability and his high intelligence, the German building his hives on the inside of Turn 2, thus ensuring those bees are safe from George the straight line bandit Russell. His woes were set to continue in first practice, as Mercedes was slow. Really slow. Bit like this comedy review at the moment because all has happened this weekend. Red Bull and Max Verstappen were back, as were Ferrari. In the gravel again. Logan Sargent was also pushing. Don't say that very often, but anyway, he was testing the limits of the track and getting squirrely on the Suzuka curbs, which turned out to be more of a qualifying preparation run than we initially realised. Now, in the week between Singapore and Japan, there were rumours that Lance Stroll would be on the sidelines after his Saturday crash at the final corner. Unfortunately, he was back in the car and claiming he was fully recovered, which was evident as he finished in his usual spot, 4 places behind his teammate. Friday would end with FP2, with the Dutch Messiah on top once again, in what was a bit of a boring session if I'm totally honest. Sensing that this session was sending anyone who stayed up for Friday's action in the UK back to sleep again, Pierre Gasly topped it off with one of Alpine's trademark wall riding manoeuvres. That's all I've got to say for that one. Now on to Saturday. Red Bull would show off their advantage yet again in FP3, with Verstappen making it a practice clean sweep, whilst McLaren flexed their muscles to position themselves as best of the rest. It wasn't a smooth session for everyone, however, Alpine deciding it wanted to be French again, whilst Alex Albon spent the hours struggling with his brakes. His teammate Logan Sargent would find an alternative stopping solution come qualifying, though I'm not sure using the turn 18 barriers as a strategy will catch on. This at least was good news for Lance Stroll, the Canadian now unable to start last like he has done in the previous 2 Grand Prix. P17 wasn't that much better though. Now I'm not gonna lie, the rest of qualifying was about as interesting as listening to a DTS fans podcast. Whilst you all try to work out who I'm referring to, just know that Max Verstappen got pole, the McLarens were second and third, and George Russell committed another war crime. Probably I was hungover Saturday morning, I don't remember. With any luck then, Sunday's Grand Prix would at least be a little more exciting. Though before we get to that, it's giveaway time, and once again, thanks to my good friends at Headout, you could be in for a chance to win free tickets to the US Grand Prix at Austin. In case you weren't aware, Headout are a ticketing company that can send you to several Grand Prix on the 2023 calendar, providing you with the best seats and for the best prices as well. We're getting closer to the US Grand Prix in Texas, and with that being a sprint weekend, you're effectively getting 2 races for the price of 1. And as usual, I've hidden 2 codes somewhere in this video, where the first to input them over at Headout's website will get Turn 4 grandstand tickets completely for free. Additionally, the first 10 people who use the code on screen can purchase those same Turn 4 tickets for the great price of just $300, which is cheaper than Costco's general admission package, I'll have you know. And if you're getting to this one a little bit later, then the FP130 code is still active for you to get 30% off your tickets regardless. So best of luck to those code hunters, and thanks once again to Headout for supporting the series. Now onto the race. I'm gonna be honest at this stage and admit, whilst I was awake for the early morning Grand Prix, I can't say I felt like it, and spent the 2 hours constantly waking up from a dream where something far more interesting was happening on the track. The start at least was chaotic, with the McLarens doing their best to squeeze past Verstappen at the start, and his teammate attempting an early double kill on the Ferraris and Mercedes. Even further back than that, we saw more drama, as Alex Albon's Williams made a desperate bid for freedom following contact with the Alpha of Bottas, and Liam Lawson told Red Bull what he thought of their driver program as he barged past homeboy Yuki Tsunoda in the opening corners. This scrap looks set to continue were it not for the back markers shitting out carbon fibre all over the track and bringing out the safety car. I think this was the last we saw of Max Verstappen. The Dutchman proceeded to time the restart to perfection before shooting off into the distance to win the Grand Prix. It wasn't quite so plain sailing for his teammate, however, who picked himself up a penalty for passing under the yellows and took his anger out on Kevin Magnussen, for some reason. At this stage, Red Bull ran the numbers and realised if Checo continued at this pace, he would go through another 6 front wings before the checkered flag. And with not enough money in the team's catering department to cover that, they just told him to retire the car. Sort of. You see, Perez found himself with a penalty following that clash with Magnussen. Yes, as it turned out, the stewards remembered what they were this weekend, and not wanting this to roll over into Qatar, they took a risk and sent the Mexican out again, serve said penalty, and retire again. This has, as usual, caused a lot of controversy, but let's just remember that this is Checo Perez, and he'll qualify like he's received a 5-place grid drop anyway. I feel a bit bad going in on Perez, as admittedly he wasn't the only one taking the George Russell line through the hairpin this weekend. Angry over what Porridge Man had done to Albon at the start, Logan Sargent looked to take his revenge when the Finn made a pass early on into the race. It didn't quite get the reaction he was hoping for though. It was really looking like a race of attrition at this point, yet the 2 Mercedes cars didn't seem to get that memo, as they spent the whole race basically trying to kill one another. Note Lewis always going for the inside line here for obvious reasons. That set the tone for the whole Grand Prix really, with the battles going on up and down the pack, just for positions you didn't really give a shit about. Fernando Alonso found himself in the middle of quite a few scraps as he fought to stay within the top 10. A depressing scenario for Aston Martin, but at least he was still trundling around. Stroll, on the other hand, had already retired due to an apparent rear wing failure. Either that or they were just putting him out of his misery. Further up the road and in the battle for second, Lando Norris was keen to be let past his teammate Oscar Piastri. Exactly what this was set to achieve, with Max practically boarding his flight home already, I haven't got a clue, but at least Twitter were happy for once. As we got into the closing stages, the top 4 then were pretty much set in stone, and instead we were glued to the battle for P5, where strategy was beginning to play a role. Singapore maestro Sainz was quickly closing in on the 2 Mercedes, who attempted to steal the Spaniard's DRS trick that helped him take victory last time out. Fair to say this didn't really work here though, as Carlos wet himself laughing the Mercs would have to settle for 6th and 7th, whilst a million years up the front, Max Verstappen was back in form, as he took victory once again and secured the Constructors' title for Red Bull, as if that was ever in doubt. Now we need to check that car for flexi wings again. No, let's not start that again. The McLarens would round out the podium, and hats off to Oscar Piastri, who made it his first time on the rostrum in a solid drive to P3. All in all though, whilst we had a lot of action and overtaking, this isn't a race I see going down in the history books anytime soon. Next up is Qatar, which I don't have particularly high hopes for either, but hey, you never know. Trying to find material for this race was a bit like getting blood out of a stone, though if you did enjoy the comedy review, I'd really appreciate it if you dropped the video a like and got subscribed for future uploads every single Sunday. A massive thank you to Head Out as well for your support, and also to all my patrons and channel members. They get early access to some of my content, so if that's something you're interested in, or you just want to support myself and the channel, then all the links you need are down in the description below. Anyway, for now, that's all from me, so I'll be seeing you very soon for another video, but until then, have a good one.